Hi, everyone. I'm Stan Mallow. Welcome to Paranormal Yakker. My guest on today's show, who I'll be yakking with, is author, historian Marilynne Roach. She has written two outstanding books about the infamous Salem Witch Trials. Those books are Six Women of Salem, The Untold Story of the Accused and Their Accusers in the Salem Witch Trials, and the Salem Witch Trials, a day-by-day chronicle of a community under siege. Marilynne Roach, welcome to Paranormal Yakker.
Thank you for the opportunity.
What motivated you to write about the Salem Witch Trials and doing it in the manner you did? Was it the historian in you, the curiosity in you, the need to separate fact from fiction when it came to the trials, or was it something else?
Well, the subject was always interesting, I have to say, because of the spooky part. Back during the bicentennial of the American Revolution, there was a lot of emphasis on local history generally. And I got a guidebook that was published by the city of Salem at that time and decided I really wanted to go out there and see for myself what I'd been reading about. I thought some of the things that I'd been told or seen didn't quite match what I'd read. What I didn't know is what I'd read wasn't all that accurate. I thought there might be a book in it. But yes, I was trying to separate fact from fiction.
In Salem, many women were accused of being witches. You focused on six of them in your book, Six Women of Salem. How did you go about deciding which six women you would hone in on?
Well, of course, there were men accused too. With these particular women, there was some biographical material that I knew existed, and usually in relation to whoever they were married to. Men's activities tended to get into the records more, except, of course, if you were involved with courts, as they were in 92, you get some more information about them.
Did those who were accused of being witches fit a certain profile, or was there a diverse range of people ranging from young to old and single to married?
Well, in 1692, just about anybody could and was accused. There was a 5-year-old girl who was the daughter of someone else who was accused. There was the richest woman in Salem, someone who was had to beg now and then to get something for her children. Young, old, intact families on their own. It was a spooky year to live through.
What was life like in Puritan Salem in the 1600s that created the conditions that led to fellow citizens accusing innocent neighbors of being witches and doing the devil's work?
There had been witch trials before throughout New England, but not a lot. Now and then, maybe one or two people at a time. The outbreak in 92 was really different. It was an anomaly in its own time as well as in history. It was a particularly stressful time when everything that could possibly go wrong went wrong. Since I'm speaking across borders here, I'm sorry to say we were at war with Canada at the time, and there were frontier raids on both sides. That was a real danger. Massachusetts, like other colonies, had lost its charter, so we haven't been a legal governing entity really for several years. A new charter had just been granted at the end of 91, and nobody really knew what was in it yet. There was a faction that wanted to split from the rest of Salem, and then within Salem Village, there were people who didn't want split from Greater Salem. Those who did, they had their own parish out there, so there were people who had decided they didn't like the minister they'd hired, so they sort of wore out the patience of three different people. And they had their fourth one. He's supposedly the permanent one, and they will have a peaceful time for the rest of his life, and that didn't happen. There are people who want to get rid of him, and people who support him, and they're at loggerheads. People who want him to leave have decided they won't pay towards his salary. So it's winter, it's cold, there's a frontier attack, the wood pile is almost gone. He hasn't been paid in over a year. Within his household, whatever started to go wrong sort of comes to a head. The two girls in the family, his daughter and a niece, they start acting oddly. They seem sick from something. They try home remedies. That doesn't work. They pray, of course, and that doesn't relieve them. They call in the local physicians one after another, and none of them come up with a solution. And finally, one of them suggests maybe they're under an evil hand, meaning under a curse, meaning for someone behind it. So a neighbor, the parents, Mr. and Mrs. Parris, don't do anything yet about it. They're away one day. They're both out of the house. And a neighbor who should know better, who's a full member of the local church, comes over to the house with a suggestion of some counter magic, traditional British folklore that people had done for generations. So she suggests to the two servants in the family, Parris's family, who are enslaved, how to make a witch cake, which is supposed to take some of the hurt that's in the girls. You take some of their urine because it's easily parted with the body without hurting. You mix it with cheap flour, right, and you make a little blood out of that. Cook it in the ashes, and then you feed it to the dog, and this hurts the witch who sent her malefic powers into supposedly suffering girls. And now some of that's in the cake, and the dog chews up and digests it, and it causes distress. And that's supposed to reveal whoever's behind it. Someone's supposed to come to the door and say, what's going on? And it shows that they're the guilty party. But I don't think anybody actually did. It's just that now the adults are taking this theory seriously, and I think it just scared the girls more. So they show worse symptoms. I think they scared themselves into self-fulfilling prophecies of feeling worse. So they're splitting headache. They start to see apparitions. But anyway, they say they see specters. There isn't an episode where it pins it down, but the adults are probably suggesting names. Well, if you think there's someone after you, do you think it's so-and-so? Do you think it's so-and-so? Or they hear them speculating, well, I wouldn't put it past Goody Osborne or something. So they name names. They name 3 people: Tituba, the Indian woman who was enslaved in the house, Sarah Good, who's the near beggar, who's got a temper because she used to be financially better off than that. He doesn't like her situation as it is now. And Sarah Osborne, a woman in the neighborhood who had made a disastrous second marriage to her former bondservant, who has kept the first husband's property farm away from the sons of the first marriage. So anyway, they're named, and now there seems to be a name behind bewitchment. And there's 2 other girls on opposite sides of the village, one to the east, one to the west, from the parsonage, and they're having the same and seeing apparitions from that. It escalates badly.
Do you know how many people were accused of being witches? And of those who were accused, how many of them were executed?
There are about 191 names I found that are mentioned as being suspect. There is about 164 of them are mentioned in legal papers. All in all, there were 52 trials. 30 people were found guilty and 20 were put dead.
Your book, The Salem Witch Trials, a day-by-day chronicle of a community under siege, was written a period of over 27 years. How did you mentally psych yourself up to stick with this undertaking for such a long period of time?
First off, I didn't know it was going to take that long. And after the first draft, I discovered that there were a lot of papers available, mostly on microfilm, in the state archive. So I had to start over. I kept going with it because at one point I realized I've invested so much of my life with this. If I just drop it, I've wasted that much of my life.
But you stuck with it. It had to be a labor of love.
Oh, it was. And it still is, because information keeps turning up. I keep working on the subject.
Your book was based on original archival research, including the discovery of previously unknown documents. How and where did you go about finding these previously unknown documents? I'm sure Agatha Christie would be proud of you. There had to be a lot of detective work involved.
Well, it was stubborn. I was going through just about everything I could in the archive that was on micro for the most. Anything that had to do with that time period I wanted to look at.
When you were writing your books about the Salem Witch Trials, did you ever feel a psychic connection with the witches, and that in some way you were channeling their spirits and that they wanted to tell their stories to you? Okay.
First place, they're not witches. They weren't witches by the definition of their own time, and it's not modern Wiccans and other modern religious groups. I feel possessive of them, of course, and I want to tell their story. And of course, in sick women, I'm trying to get inside their head.
At the trials, did the accused have lawyers or someone, even a family member, who would speak up for them and defend them, or did they have to fend for themselves?
I don't think anybody did for any kind of a case back then. There were, they called them attorneys. You didn't have to be a lawyer per se. The idea was you tell the truth, which they did and weren't believed. There were people who did offer to testify for various neighbors. I don't know if they were given a chance or not, but the paperwork is there. They're saying this is a good Christian woman. I've known her so long, and she's always been a decent neighbor, and I'm on record saying that. And there were at least 4 different petitions that have survived, signed by dozens of neighbors speaking up for different people. Didn't do any good. They did put their names out there.
Were all who were found guilty of being a witch hanged, or other types of punishment given?
19 of the people who were found guilty were hanged. The others were actually eventually, if they hadn't died in prison of natural causes or escaped, they were let go. One man was pressed to death. I'm sure everyone's heard of Giles Corey. He wasn't actually tried because he was so stubborn he wouldn't cooperate with being tried. He didn't trust his court. He pleads not guilty. And then when they ask him, how will you be tried? And he wouldn't say any. Apparently, under English common law, it was legal to threaten, to press someone, which is putting heavy weights on them until they either give in or they die, or it's too late to escape it. So he was pressed to death. The one and only time it was done, nobody else was, but he is included in the reparations afterwards and the names of people being cleared, but he was never actually tried. 30 people were found guilty, but of that, only 19 of them. One died in jail.
How did the locals of Salem treat family members of the accused? Were they shunned, tarred, and feathered out of the community, accused of being collaborators with the devils themselves?
Let's take as an example Rebecca Nurse's family. They stuck by her the whole way. They spoke up for her. They had this written deposition saying that she's a good woman and that the person who said such and such was not to be trusted. They got a petition together after she is found guilty. They take paperwork as high as the governor and get a reprieve, but that falls through, so she does hang. Some of the families in Andover, and there were more people accused in neighboring Andover than in Salem, as you can tell. Some of them, the women who were accused there and actually confessed, because there were quite a few confessed, and they said afterwards they didn't know what they were saying at the time. They were so frightened and confused. Some of their family members were convinced temporarily maybe she is a witch and it would be best to confess it. As one brother-in-law said to his sister-in-law, God wouldn't let so many good men be this mistaken. But that does happen from time to time.
Was there any remorse or apologies on the part of the accusers and those who joined in the insanity that prevailed, or did they just try to sweep it under the rug?
I imagine a lot of them didn't want to talk about it. Well, actually, when it ended, there were some people who thought there was a cover-up and that the devil really was recruiting in Massachusetts. As for personal apologies, Samuel Parris, the minister in whose house it started, he makes a half apology, sort of, but it was too little too late. The province of Massachusetts in 1697 ordered a public fast, which is where everybody goes to their respective churches, and it's a service where everybody collectively apologizes to God and to the community for whatever's going wrong. The wording for the fast was kind of sufficiently vague that it got passed by the legend, but everybody knew this is about the witch trial. One of the judges, Samuel Sewell in Boston, stood up during the service in his church. His minister read a personal apology from him for his part in messing things up. Ann Putnam, who was one of the early afflicted girls, quite evident as an afflicted witness accuser throughout many of the trials. When she was an adult and wanted to be a fully communing member of her local Salem Village church, her confession of faith that she gave through the later minister there, she apologizes for her part in the witch trials, being deluded by the devil, which is collaborating, I suppose, put it that way, and especially causing the deaths of Miss Goody Nurse and her relatives.
A lot of years have passed since that dark time in the history of Salem. Has any politician or some group have a movement to grant pardons posthumously to those innocents who were wrongfully accused of being witches?
Starting in 1703, I think, one of the women who had been found guilty but still alive, she petitioned to have her name cleared just in case something went wrong and the panic starts up again. More people who had the death sentences passed on them, or the families of the people who did not survive petitioned. By 1711, Massachusetts issued a reversal of attainder on the people who were found guilty, according to whatever petitions they had. And there's always names that are listed. They're not to be considered as having been in the devil's snare, and it's no smear on their descendants.
Should someone visit Salem, can you recommend any sites related to the witch trials?
In Salem itself, there are two memorials in the city of Salem, one in downtown Salem, adjacent to the ancient burying ground. It's sort of a landscape design that was done from an international competition back for the 1992 300th anniversary. It's a green space with some trees and stone wall, bench-like slabs coming out, one for each of the people who had died, who had either been hanged and Giles Corey, with the dates of their deaths. And the second site in Salem itself is the location where the hanging took place, called Proctor's Lake, in the town of Danvers nearby, which was Salem Village then. There is a memorial also from 1990. There is the site of the parsonage, which was excavated archaeologically back in the 1960s and 70s. You see the stone cellar hole and then the other two rooms outlined. But if you've read the trial transcripts and you're familiar with the vernacular architecture of the time, you know that the room above the root cellar is where the girls were having contortions and fits and seeing the devil. And in the other room is where Tituba was listening to this and trying to make sense of it and so forth. Rebecca Nurse's house is then not with the family burying ground where she presumably is buried. Also a memorial from the 1880s that her descendants raised to her, which was the first memorial to someone who had been executed as a witch anywhere. And also a replica of the meeting house from Salem Village where some of the early hearings took place, because a meeting house does civil as well as religious gatherings. That's where some of the first hearings took place. Oh, and in Salem itself, Judge Corwin's house is still in existence, right in the middle of town. It's called the Witch House because that's what people called it for generations, and they kind of stuck with the name. But it's where he and his family lived. Let's see, and other places really are represented by plaques on the wall. And
should any of my viewers want to order your books, 6 Women of Salem, The Untold Story of the Accused and Their Accusers in the Salem Witch Trial, and the Salem Witch Trials, a day-by-day chronicle of community under siege, how do they go about doing that?
It's on Amazon and other places.
Okay.
Your local bookstore has it. Independents are very good. My website should have linked MarilynneRoach.com. It spelled Marilynne and Roach correctly because neither one is the usual way anyone else.
Marilynne Roach, I thank you for being my guest on Paranormal Yacker. It's been quite informative, and I do look forward to interviewing you again. We'll be discussing another groundbreaking book. I know you'll be writing, I'll be reading.
Thank you. And I'm working on it.
Hi, everyone. I'm Stan Mallow, the Paranormal Yacker. I hope you enjoyed the interview you just watched. To be sure you don't miss any interviews on my free YouTube channel, all you have to do is press the subscribe button on your screen.